to the Wednesday CME lecture series. So, Candy Society of Medicine usually conduct a lot of academic lectures. But we thought, I know it's academic for you, but we thought we change, and because we are facing significant food shortage, and it's a timely topic, that's why we have chosen. We have the speaker today is Professor Buddhi Marambe. He is professor attached to Department of Crop Science, Faculty of Agriculture, Department of Peradeniya. So I should thank GMOA Branch Union Sampath Atapattu. Actually, he's the one gave this seed of idea to we go out of the way and do a different topic because we all are facing a difficult situation in the country. So, which lateral thinking might help us. All of our nation's thinking should change now, and we all should do something different. So, if I introduce the speaker, so he's Professor Buddhi Marambe. Professor Buddhi Marambe obtained his BSc degree in agriculture from the University of Peradeniya, and Master of Agriculture and Doctor of Agriculture from Hiroshima University, Japan. He has more than 36 years of experience in academic as an academic at the Department of Crop Science, Faculty of Agriculture, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. His research interests include weed science, climate change, and food security. With more than 150 research publications, Professor Marambe has also won the Presidential Award and the National Research Council Award, Merit Award in Sri Lanka for scientific research. Professor Marambe is the chairman of the National Invasive Species Specialist Group, NISSG, and the former chairman and a member of the National Experts Committee on Climate Change Adaptation, NECCCA, of the Ministry of Environment. He was a member of the government government delegation on climate negotiations at United Nations Framework Convention on the Climate Change, UNFCCC, during past 8 years. He was also the Assistant Secretary for Sri Lanka Organic Agriculture Movement for the period of 2001 to 2003. While being an academic, he also has served as a non-executive member of the boards of several private sector organizations, providing technical guidance to agriculture-related operations, and council member and executive committee member of many services as consultant to World Bank, ADB, EU, UNDP, FAO, ICRAF, and CIAT in nationally and internationally important issues related to climate change, food security, and agriculture. So I'm very delighted to invite Professor Marambe, and I should thank Dr. Iresha, our director, for gathering this occasion as well. Please, over to you, sir, Professor Buddhi Marambe, to address you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. The director of the hospital, Dr. Atapattu, and other colleagues who are here. It's a pleasure and a privilege actually to be invited to this occasion. And I learn it's usually a very academic session, and that puts a lot of weight on my shoulders actually. That I'll be very careful in my presentation, and I'll try to do my best to serve the purpose of me being invited today. The topic that I have selected and was given to me also after discussion with Dr. Atapattu, as you see on the screen. And I must start with a short note like this. What I'm going to present to you will be, the initial part will be on the total negative side. But that does not mean that I'm trying to create a fear psychosis among you and to look at everything negatively. Of course, I was talking a little while ago to a few colleagues who are here, few specialist doctors who are here, and they say, of course, this fear has to be generated within your mind in order for you to act in certain cases. But remember, the country is now doing firefighting, very unfortunately. But we have to come out of this mode and to have some sustainable mechanism for future. And specifically to make sure our authorities will not take such illogical, unscientific and non-evidence-based decisions with respect to agriculture or any other field in this country in the future. So I will initially talk about that negative part and also let you know what are the possible ways and means that we can overcome the crisis. That's the important thing. So we all have to work together. It's very unfortunate. Group of people take decision, impose those decisions on the society, and then everyone, after being affected, will have to find solutions together. You cannot force people to do it unless we try to do it willingly, on our own, and try to do what we can do best. That's the important part. Even home gardening is not that you look at the neighbor's home garden and try to do something. No, that's not going to work. I'm sure you remember about 2 years ago when the lockdown was there, how quickly people went out and how eager people to go and do home gardening. But very unfortunately, it didn't work that way. So we have to keep in mind that if at all we are going to move on to find any solution in cultivation, regarding animals or so on, that has to be done wholeheartedly. You have to move into the system and make sure move into the process and activity. So that's a little information that I want to give you at the very beginning. Everyone nowadays is worried about food shortages. And while we are talking about food shortages, we are also talking about food security. Two terms look very attractive, but the meaning of that term is very complex. I'm sure you will understand that aspect. We usually say food security is national security. Winning a war is, of course, something to deal with national security. But making sure the countryman is allowed all the opportunities available on this planet Earth to have access to availability, to make sure there's availability, affordability of food, and so on, is something very serious. It's not like winning a war. So, just because of that, let me use a slide, the next slide, to talk to you a little bit about food security. Not to challenge your intellectual capacity, but it's good to be on the same page when we start talking about subject like this. So let me use the definition given by the FAO in the World Summit that was held in 1996 and later updated in 2009. Once again, let me put it in simple terms because FAO also comes up with very detailed, lengthy sentences. Sometimes when you go to the end of the sentence, you have forgotten the beginning. So just to avoid that situation, let me put it in simple terms. These are the six components that comes under food security. And the irony is that unless all these six components are assured, there's no food security. That's the important point to keep in mind. Food security does not mean food availability. So it's the availability, that's one of the major issues that we are worried right now, whether there is enough to go around, for example, and then accessibility, even though food is available, if you cannot have access, remember what happened with the diesel crisis, we have never even considered diesel as an important input to agriculture sector. When the Nuarelia vegetable growers had their product ready to be marketed, there was no vehicle to transport them to district or the central economic centers. When they found transport a few days later, brought the material to the economic centers, then there were no lorries and vehicles for buyers to come in. So finally, there was huge wastage and so on. Even now, people are finding it extremely difficult, as you and me, to find the required for to do their day-to-day activities. So accessibility has become a major issue nowadays, mainly because of the transportation issues, and of course, some people are keeping the stocks with them, like farmers. Farming community is very strategic. I must tell you, they know what is in store for them for future. So when they have their harvest, the first thing that they will look after is about their own family food security. Natural. I mean, they are the producers as well as consumers. We are consumers as a lot. But farming community, they are producers and consumers, both. So they know how to balance the structure, their economy and so on. So majority of the food, especially paddy, that we have harvested is not coming to the market. So that's one thing that we are worried, but of course there are issues which I can discuss later. And then comes affordability. Even if availability is there, accessibility is there, if you cannot purchase it, if you don't have the purchasing power, if the prices are exorbitant, then of course still there's a problem of food security because people cannot have access on one hand, but if people cannot purchase as well. I'm sure if you go to the market right now, you must have seen the prices of moonbeam, green gram. When we imported moonbeam about 1.5 years ago from Australia, it was sold in the market to a price between 120 rupees to 200 rupees per kilogram. Now it's about 940, 950 kilograms, rupees per kilogram. Good. The farming community get a good price. I think we have to acknowledge that aspect. But then the overall objective has not been met. If you are worried about the nutritional status of the 22 million consumers in this country, including the farming community, then we have not done justice. Exorbitant prices and people cannot afford it. So there should be mechanism. You cannot look at only one end in a food chain or food system. You have to consider all actors in the food system. I'm not here to tell you that we have to remove middlemen. No. Middlemen have to be there, but you have to use them efficiently and effectively. That's why there's a government every time for anything. That's what that control, that regulation will have to take place. And then comes the quality, nutrition, and safety, which is very close to you. I'm assured it's very close to your hearts as well as to agriculturists like us. But nowadays, in the present day context, though I'm not going to talk to you about the last three bullet points because of time, I will be focusing on the first three bullet points because that is what we see actually on the face value. There's an issue with respect to availability, issue with respect to access, and issue with respect to affordability. Things are going to get aggravated further if we continue our consumption pattern like this in months to come. I repeat, all these shortages that we are talking about under one condition, that we are going to continue our consumption pattern like the way that we have been doing in the past. I will come to those statistics in a while. Okay? But then on top of all these six bullet points, stability plays a very important role play. These are not one-time events. They should be continuous, sustainable. Then and only then a country can be happy that there is food security. And let me also tell you one thing before I proceed. Food security of a country can be achieved in two main ways. One thing is to maximize the contribution of agriculture in achieving food security. The second one, import the gap, import and fill the gap. In both cases, food security can be met. What our country has been doing over the years since gaining independence in 1948 is trying to see how we can maximize our contribution, how we can maximize the contribution from our own agricultural production, especially focusing on the staple that is paddy, rice, and try to achieve the food security only in terms of paddy or rice by using our own production. You will see certain statistics that I'm going to show you the way the national level commitments have contributed in achieving security in paddy and rice. So here onwards, I'll be focusing more on paddy, our main staple, because that's an easy example that I can get. And also, I'm sure everybody will start feeling that is very close to yourself because that's something that we consume a lot. So let me show you one thing about how our paddy sector has performed. This example that I'm going to give you will let you know how we have performed in the past and what sort of damage recent decisions of the government has made. Tables have been changed upside down. Just one decision and in one season's time. It's a very unfortunate scenario. Just look at this figure. The blue line tells you the production of rice, not paddy, rice. When you send 100 kilograms of paddy to the miller, you will get about 65 kilograms of rice. That means the conversion factor is about 65%. Usually, the farming community, the main millers say the conversion factor is 1.6. You need 1.6 of paddy, quantity of paddy, in order to get one quantity of rice. So that's a general calculation that they do. If you look at the red line, that indicates the requirement of rice in Sri Lanka. And you can see when you start in 1950s, for example, we had a population close to about 6 million. And remember, depending on our production, we have imported 60% of our rice requirement, mainly from Myanmar and other countries. That was the situation in early 1950s and 1940s. We had our own agriculture. We have been growing our own traditional varieties. We have been practicing traditional technologies. We are very proud of that. But of course, this is the level of yield that we could get. Our paddy yield in 1950s was merely 650 kilograms per hectare. And our scientists at that time knew, they were able to foresee that the population is increasing. You have to feed the increasing mouth and stomach, And therefore, in order to achieve this in the long run, they launched a massive research and development program starting from 1952-53 in order to develop high-yielding varieties from the germplasm that we have in country. Of course, certain genes were imported from other varieties. The first such effort that succeeded was starting from 1952-53. After laboring about 6 to 8 years, in 1958 we were able to release our first high-yielding variety, which is called H4. I'm sure you have heard H4 variety, H4 variety, and that is a product of a cross between Murugakayan 302, a variety that we had in Sri Lanka at that time, and a variety imported from Indonesia called MAS. That was a hybridization program later converted into Piola. And this change made a dramatic influence to Sri Lankan agriculture. Remember what I told you? In 1950s early, our paddy yield average was just 650 kilograms per hectare. But H4 started yielding 1,500 to 2,000 kilograms per hectare. Look at the jump. Look at the efforts made by our own scientists. Now, I'm sure you will understand. Please don't think a variety can come out overnight. Even nowadays, with the best available technology anywhere in the world, it takes at least 6 years to release a paddy variety if you start breeding now. If you look at tea, it takes 25 years to release a tea variety or tea group. But tea, with the new technology coming in, we are now being able to reduce it to 18 years, still 1/8. It takes such a long period of time. So in order to do that, you have to have these foresight. You have to be able to dream, look at future, identify the problems that can appear. Then and only then you can start working on these breeding programs in plants. So our scientists started doing it, starting from early 1950s. After H4, I'm sure these famous varieties that we have heard, BG, AT, LD, BW varieties, all those contributed much. And by 2020, starting from mere 650 kilograms per hectare, we are now producing 4,800 kilograms per hectare, and we are the highest in the region from the unit productivity. India still trying to break the 4 kilogram per hectare barrier. Only country that have even reached closer to us from South Asia is Bangladesh. Now people talk about Southeast Asia, people talk about Australia, Japan, Korea, China. Every country is yielding high, and they are asking why we cannot do it. Now let me tell you the secret of that as well. We are proud and we are happy we didn't have volcanoes in Sri Lanka. The countries that had volcanoes, erupted volcanoes, I must tell you, their soil is rich because of volcanic ash. And that volcanic ash, wherever it is, it always gives very high yields even with very low inputs. Our soils are different. There are only 15,000 hectares in this country in an area, a triangle, that produce the best yields. Remember what I told you? 4,800 tons per hectare is our national average. That means there can be areas giving higher and lower yields. That's what national average has done. If you go to Mena, Murukan and Tunukka area in the northern province, that's the area we call rice bowl in Sri Lanka. There the yield, even without or even addition of a little bit of fertilizer, without fertilizer it will be about 7 to 8 tons per hectare. Add a little bit of fertilizer, it gives you about 10 tons per hectare. Why? Because of the soil type. The soil type which is there is called grumosol, and we have only 14,000 hectares of grumosol out of these 65,610 square kilometers of land mass in Sri Lanka. And people who entered Sri Lanka from Mena, ancient days, would have seen this soil. And that's the time they thought the soil would have been there in all over Sri Lanka and called the country Tambapani. That's the first impression that you get. But it is an entirely different scenario. We have 3 climatic zones, 7 agroclimatic zones, 46 agroecological regions, and 200 soil series. Look at the combinations and permutations that you can get. It's a blessing in disguise on one hand. We have such a diversity that we can plan, but planning and implementing itself is not an easy task because agriculture is something that you deal with the environment, natural environment always. That's where we have to be very careful. So our scientists were able to break the barriers. And you can see ups and downs here and there in our production. Since 2008, with all the efforts the country has made, Sri Lanka was proud enough to announce that we are now producing paddy that can be converted to rice, providing more than what we can consume, providing more rice than we can consume. I'm not trying to talk about self-sufficiency because when you talk about self-sufficiency, wheat flour come into picture, a lot of other things come into picture. But my point is that we are being able to produce more rice than we can consume in a stable manner since 2008. And that has been a success story of Sri Lanka, where many of the countries in the region have failed to achieve. Thanks to the scientists, thanks to the universities, the special faculties of agriculture, and more importantly, the private sector and the farming community who accepted the technology and decided to cultivate the high yielding varieties our own scientists have produced. We cultivate about 1.3 million hectares of paddy. Nothing in terms of extent compared to other countries, but just 1.3 million hectares of paddy. And 98%, more than 98% of that extent is cultivated to new high-yielding varieties produced by our own scientists. We don't import seed paddy. We don't import varieties of paddy. By law, by statute, it's prohibited to import paddy. But of course, you can import rice. Paddy can be planted, rice cannot be planted, isn't it? So we are trying to safeguard interests of our paddy production from square one. The Plant Protection Act does not allow to bring in seed paddy to Sri Lanka. In other words, our own cultivation requirement of seed paddy is produced within the country. For next Maha season, we have to do it in this Yala season. For the following Yala season, we have to make sure seed paddy requirement is made available out of the production of the Maha season. That's the pattern that we have been continuing and we have been very successful. If you look at all the things that are said here, all the hiccups and so on, the first ever record of using mineral fertilizer for paddy production came in 1952. The first ever record of giving fertilizer subsidy was in 1962, 10 years later than after introducing mineral fertilizer to Sri Lanka. And H4 was introduced in 1958. Just look at the way the yield patterns have changed from the time introduction of new H4 variety, new high yielding varieties. You see the yields are going up, and then yields have gone down because of the drought, environmental issues. It's going further up. Is there a possibility to have a mark? Okay, thank you very much. Let's make things easy for me. Yes, you're fine. Right. You can see what is happening. Right. Every time when there's a drought, every time when there are environmental issues, the progress that we have made have all of a sudden gone for a dip. But we have recovered. That is because we Sri Lankans have the technology, have the willingness, have the political will as well to make sure to consider rice as the priority crop and also to make sure it achieves its own heights so that it develops further. And I'm sure you will be knowing what went on in 1953. If you heard 1952, we had the first Sri Lanka-China rubber rice pact. We sell rubber, they give us rice. Why? This is the gap that we have to fill up with rice. Production and the requirement. Right? And of course, rice also led us into a hartal in 1953. Lack of rice. And after 70 years, we also had hartal recently in Sri Lanka. We were talking about this is the first national level hartal that was held since 1953. That was a food hartal, I must tell you. And this is a very important point in 2008. If you remember very well, in 2007, the Sri Lankan government, the former president, Maithripala Sirisena, was the agriculture minister at that time. In 2007, we started a massive national level cultivation program called Api Babu. And thanks to that, in 2008, we have had higher yields in all aspects, all crops that we cultivated, without knowing that there's going to be a world food price crisis in 2008. We didn't know that when we started that program in 2007. I was happy to be involved. I was the dean of the Faculty of Agriculture at that time. So naturally, as a dean, I was part and parcel of this whole affair. And the country went forward in 2008 without being affected. We were the only country probably in South Asia and Southeast Asia who were not affected, who were not requesting paddy or rice from other countries for us to consume. Because we were able to produce on our own even during this period. And it was a time that the foundation was really laid to continue stable production of rice at levels that we even cannot consume. More being produced. And thanks to this excess production, somebody may be asking now, what happened to that excess? I'm sure you have seen a biscuit called, sorry, I'm not promoting a brand, Home biscuit. That's a rice-based biscuit, which came up thanks to this excess rice that we had. Rice noodles came thanks to the excess rice we had. Even beer in Sri Lanka is produced by using our own rice. And our, as soon as I hear again, the broken rice was made into animal feed because we had excess rice to deal with. So our industries flourished to make sure, based on rice, we were able to do a lot of things at that time until in the recent past. So this is something that has been there. I'm not including the results of 2021. It's the same as in the case of 2020. You can see the excess that we have, excess that we had in 2020. 2021 is also the same. But what happened next was unbelievable. And this is the worst ever decision that was taken by any government in Sri Lanka since 1948. I didn't know what happened before that, but at least when you look at the records, on 27th April 2021, the Cabinet of Ministers, based on a cabinet paper submitted by His Excellency the President, decided to go ahead and immediately ban import of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides, which are important category. They are not the only category of inputs that will ensure higher agricultural productivity. No, it's one or two important categories of inputs. They also import ban, complete ban. On 6th May 2021, the ban was legalized by issuing an extraordinary gazette notification. But there were a lot of issues coming up later. Scientists started protesting. Farmers came onto the tarred roads rather than being in their paddy fields, for example, demanding the fertilizer. Not that they have been supported by political parties. Maybe they have been supported by the private sector, but they also knew by practice what is happening on the ground. My PhD, 5 years, is on compost. I worked here after doing my PhD in the university. My research was on biofertilizer. People start whacking us even at that time with late Sangakar. I was working on biofertilizer. Then I was the assistant secretary of Lanka Organic Agriculture Movement of this country. And then later I also served as non-executive director in many private sector organizations who needed my expert advice to develop their agricultural sectors. We as academia, when we are called upon, we have always provided service, sometimes free of charge, sometimes money, but the advice is the same. I mean, we cannot tell two things to different people. Even if His Excellency called me tomorrow and asked me to do a presentation, this is exactly the presentation that we're doing in front of you. Because we cannot go and tell two things to two different audiences. Only difference that can take place is whatever the data that I have to update the presentation that I'm going to do to you today. Based on new data, certain things might change. Conclusions will change always, right? And remember, this is the time the decision was taken. By 30th November last year, government decided to revoke that decision. The gazette issued on 6th May to ban importation of fertilizer and pesticide was removed on 30th November 2021. A lot of people thought material will come in. No. The time that we took this decision, we even did not know or we were not told accurately and correctly there's a foreign exchange crisis. By the time it was revoked, there's a foreign exchange crisis. But look at the 10-month period, what the 10-month period has done. The damage has already been done. We have started feeling the pressure right now. That's why we are going around the country telling people exactly what is in store for us and to make sure we will not face that situation in the long run. Try to see how we can look at it. If we act together right now, the goalpost that we say is not good to say a goalpost because we don't want to reach that goalpost of shortage. But that goalpost can be shifted further and we may not even reach it. Fine. Such a negative goalpost we don't need to reach. Isn't it? A goal we have to achieve or reach. But we need not do that if we try to work together. That's the idea of this presentation as well. And you must be wondering why. I'm one of the person. There were many other people. From the day the gazette notification was issued on 6th May last year, we have been going around telling people, writing, doing everything. Many others joined hands thereafter to say, asking the government to remove this gazette. Don't allow this to happen. Because the ill effects are written all over from the time the decision was taken. අපි කියන්නේ පොලේක 4 කොනේ ලියවිලා තියෙනවා. මේකෙන් වෙන්න පුළුවන් Avasana Vipaka Mukhadagina. But unfortunately, it went into deep years. But fine, it went into deep years. At least the reality, what many people said has become true, but we cannot be satisfied. We cannot be happy. A scientist can always be happy when the predictions become true. But here, the predictions have become true, but we are weeping inside. That's what happened. And this is the main result that we use to give this prediction, saying that this is what's going to happen if you continue this. It's not my research work. This is research work done for 11 long years, 22 continuous seasons by the Rice Research and Development Institute at Patharagoda, Department of Agriculture, a government-owned research undertaking. Work carried out from 2003 to 2014 in Yala and Maha seasons, A and B figures very categorically said what is given in pink color. What is given in pink color? It clearly said in all 22 seasons, organic matter or organic fertilizer alone will always produce a yield which is 21.5% to 33% lower than the conventional agriculture. It's very clear. 22 continuous seasons with all fluctuations you are looking at in the environment and everything. This was a result. This was a result outcome that we were using to tell the government of Sri Lanka not to go ahead with this. It's even been published in the oldest tropical agriculturist, oldest journal in the tropical climates, in the tropical world, which is our own journal called Tropical Agriculturist. That was published in 2016, but still it went into deep years. Even many other people bringing this example to show. So what went on? Just one season, a whole country being made into an experimental plot by continuing with a so-called novel technique. Organic farming, I'm not blaming organic farming. Organic farming have been there for ages, for centuries in Sri Lanka. And there are still people who do organic farming very well and earn huge sums of money, bringing in foreign exchange to this country. Let it prosper. No argument at all. But we are looking at maximizing the contribution of agriculture in this country to food security. Because even before this foreign exchange crisis came in, we have been working or we have been functioning on very thin budget margin. So foreign exchange is necessary while the production is required. Good quality, nutritious production of agriculture. These are the end results that we had from the past Maha season. The decision was taken halfway of the Yala season previously. It was implemented during Maha season. It started in September 2021. We harvested paddy February, March 2022, that's this year. And our paddy production from the main cultivating season, Yala and Maha. Maha is our main season as the term implies as well. The paddy yield has been declined by about 50%. And not only that, paddy is our main food crop. The other point is the animal feed crop. I'm sure you have seen the egg prices are going up every day. Chicken meat is going up every day. Why? We did not have adequate maize being produced in this country, which is one of the important raw materials in animal feed. And what happened? Maha is also the main cultivating season for maize. The maize yields were reduced by about 65 to 70%. In year-on-year basis, thanks to all these happenings, just last month, Sri Lanka recorded the highest ever food inflation, 57.4% since gaining independence on a year-on-year, month-to-month basis. That's the end result. But if I do not talk to you a little bit about tea, I'll be doing injustice, a lot of injustice here. Paddy is our main food crop, maize is our main animal feed crop. Tea is our main export agricultural crop. See what happened. See what happened to maize. The tea. The main tea production, if you look at the last 2 months, for example, in 2021, the main tea production, I'm not talking about the green tea leaves that people go and pluck. You make tea out of it, which you purchase from the market. The main tea production just in the last 2 months was reduced by more than 12 million kilograms. You know, we don't have tea culture, although we are tea producer. Why I say we don't have tea culture is 95% of the tea that we produce is exported. So that means it's a foreign exchange earner. Just assume that there's a price tag of mere $2 per kilogram of made tea. We would have earned about 25 million US dollars. You cannot put Sri Lanka's tea at such low level. We usually fetch about sometime this last month it was $4.7 per kilogram. So likewise, just Assume a $4 per kilogram. Look at the amount of foreign exchange that we have missed. Same thing was very clear during the first quarter of this year, where the first quarter export earnings out of tea was 52 million US dollars less than the first quarter of last year. This is the price that the whole country has paid. And it is very clearly seen in the global scenario as well. There's something called Global Food Security Index, which is, publicized every year, starting from 2012. When we started doing that, Sri Lanka was right on top in the South Asian countries. We were the best in terms of food security among South Asian countries. It continues every year. Until 2019, we were number one. 2020, we became number two. Well, there are a lot of efforts that were made by government of Sri Lanka in 2020, I must tell you, to make sure agriculture continues despite the lockdown. So we have to thank the government of Sri Lanka for doing that, to make sure Sri Lankan agriculture will prosper. There are a lot of facilities being given. I think that's a pretty good thing that the government of Sri Lanka did. But then look at what happened in 2021. We are now in number 3%. Forget about the question. That itself indicates, even at the global indicators, we are going through a deep dive in the case of food security of our country. Now, it's an important thing to see. We have failed in one season, as you see. 50% of the cultivation has gone for 6. Where are we in the case of this young season, which started in March 2022, and some of the people who started cultivating new or in March are now even harvesting their product. If you look at the eastern province, in some areas, harvesting or ready to harvest, right? And we wanted to cultivate about 500,000 hectares in the other season. In the Maha season, usually about 800 to 850,000 hectares. That's the level of cultivation that we do. But we don't go up to this level because of natural scenarios. It will end up in about 450. Now, about 4 days ago, 18 June, this was the cultivated extent, 394,000. And when people came to know 65,000 metric tons of urea will be landing in Sri Lanka soon, so people started doing their land preparation. So 81,000 came in land preparation. Good on one hand. But the problem is people who cultivate late, their harvesting time will be coincided with heavy rains at the end. So those are some things that we have to do and plan very well. Even if the fertilizer is to be distributed. So scarcity of synthetic fertilizer and pesticides were there. More importantly, poor at the time of land preparation and at the time of harvest. Both ends of paddy cultivation were affected for the first time in the history because of lack of work, lack of diesel. That's the second problem that has come up. And there's exorbitant prices of majority of the agriculture inputs because the limited nature that they have been marketed. Private sector markets it, but of course they have their own issues, good or bad. What they try to do is they will add the price tag to the consumer at the end. So farmer gets affected, cost of production goes up, naturally paddy prices will go up. Mind you, if the paddy price is 100 rupees per kilogram, then the rice price is at least 196 rupees per kilogram. That's the conversion. When you look at all the minimum costs involved in the whole process, from harvesting paddy, milling it, and then selling it to the market. So paddy price, at least the wholesale price will be 196. So that's why we usually say the retail price is twice the paddy purchase price. So every time that's the conversion that will work. If you find price at a lower price than this conversion, that means the government has subsidized, unless it is being imported at a cheaper price. When the government says they are subsidizing, it's our money at the end. No minister will pump in his or her own money to subsidize. It's our money. It also goes from national budget. So that's the situation right now, and we scientifically looking at all data, at least, I'm not talking 50%, at least 50% reduction will be there in our season. So 2 seasons have failed by giving 50% less yield. So what is in store for us in that case? This is the food shortage that we are talking about. This is why we are worried. If you look at the country's monthly rice requirement, it's about 185,000 to 195,000 metric tons. Remember what I told you at the beginning? We talk about all these shortages, assuming that this consumption pattern will continue. This consumption pattern. I'm not asking people not to eat rice, but if this consumption pattern continues, there will be a problem in the near future. Our annual rice requirement is about 2.3 to 2.4 million metric tons. If you just look at this conversion, multiply it by 12. That's the conversion. There can be higher demands in certain periods of the year, lower demand in other. And if you do it by the end of October 2021, our own rice production will not be in a position to meet our rice requirement. This is the shortage that we are talking about. In other words, November and December, we may require 195,000 metric tons of rice per month to be imported from another country. And that is not the case. This will continue to happen until the Maha season paddy is harvested in next year February, gone to the mill, milled into a milled rice, and then come to the market. You know, අපි අලුත් හාලේ බත් කනවා කියලා කරනවා. අලුත් හාලේ බත් කියන්නේ කිරිබත්. You cannot consume, you cannot cook the way that we cook if you use new rice harvest. All millers usually keep it in store for about 3 to 4 months before they mill. කෙනෙකුට කියන්න පුළුවන් අපි කන්නේ පරණ හාල් කියලා. No, that is the way to do it because otherwise the milling outturn will be extremely low. Depending on the variety, also milling outturn is low. Remember I told you it's 65%. That's the conversion from paddy to rice. And government of Sri Lanka knew this before us, though they did not divulge this happening. Though they were giving a lot of promises, last year, for the very first time, they liberalized the rice imports to Sri Lanka. Earlier, you should have permit to import rice. Now, even you and me can import rice and sell it in the market. So starting from last November, December, rice started flowing in. This year alone, unbelievably large stocks of rice being imported to Sri Lanka. And we have taken all these into account and to say that we are going to run short of rice by end of October, including those things that we are talking about. Please keep that in mind. And if you look at the rice imports to Sri Lanka, in 2019, we imported only 20,000 metric tons. That's mainly basmati, jasmine rice, and several special rices for the tourism industry, hotel, and we have to provide them also. And there's a demand for those rices. Remember what I told you? Food security does not mean making available food, but food should be available based on your liking. Preference is there always, right? So because of that, 20,000 metric tons of rice was imported. No paddy, mind you. 2020, 14,000 metric tons of rice were imported. So it's reducing starting from quite a long period of time. You saw the production and requirement figure, right? By looking at that, you can really see we don't need rice or paddy to be imported to feed the nation. But 2021, October, November, December, this is what happened. We imported 147,000 metric tons of rice. 2022, in the first 5.5 months, we have imported more than 338,000 metric tons of rice, spending 94 million US dollars. And just today morning, I was told that altogether, including things that we imported in the month of June, we have imported about 365,000 metric tons of rice to this country. We usually do these imports towards the latter part, if at all there's a necessity. But we are now importing from the very beginning of the year. Of course, you cannot import 360,000 metric tons at once. It has to be scattered. And we know what our country requirement is per month. So even to start importing to meet the requirements in October or November, we have to start the process now. And then start bringing in rice. And we also know rice cannot be stored. So anybody, if you try to store rice for more than 2 months, you are in trouble. Anybody who try to store paddy in your own households, you will be in trouble. Right? You know, අපි අර බැත කියලා කියන්නේ නේද? කමදේ ගිහිලා කන්ද ගැහුවට පස්සේ actually develop වෙන heat එක ගැන සලකලා බැලුවොත් if you put your hands in, palm in, only the bones will come out. Right? That's the level of temperature build up. And that damages the paddy as well. Okay, so don't keep it for long. The best advice is if you are storing paddy, my request is not to do so. Don't create artificial scarcity in the market. If anyone is storing, at least start drying it in every 2 to 3 weeks. If you want to make it later, milled into rice, we can then hardly milled into rice, and thereafter it look like battery is low. I don't know. Can someone help me? Please here. Just give me a little bit of time. Okay, it's done. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, this is the scenario that we are facing right now. And as of today, with all these calculations coming into effect, we still need about 400,000 metric tons of rice. I must tell you, government has taken these calculations seriously. After all, people are looking at scientific data made available. More importantly, just looking at data will not suffice if you cannot interpret them properly. So this interpretation what matters. This interpretation very clearly says we need about 400,000 metric tons for this year. Totally, from last year, the scientists were telling that if you continue with this policy, we'll require about 800,000 metric tons of rice. Look how it's becoming reality. Unfortunately, right? That's what has happened. And as of today, as I told you, but the time that we start feeling the pressure, we can change it together. If we start acting on quickly, if the government starts bringing in these 400,000 metric tons of rice at the correct time, then we'll never feel the pressure in terms of rice because rice will be available. Remember what I told you? Either maximize the contribution from agriculture or import it. Okay, and even to import, mind you, out of the global rice production, only 4% is available in the world market to import. So the pressure will be developing towards the latter part of the year every time. So the government of Sri Lanka will have to act, and I see that they are acting right now. So this thing is happening. That's one good thing to remember. This is happening. So we may see that though I say today is end of October, maybe in weeks or two, in 2 to 3 weeks time, I may be talking about November. When the material is available, when you are assured of material coming in, why create a fear psychosis once again on people's mind? But from now on, we have to work together stepwise to make sure this goalpost, which we do not want to reach, as I told you, to push further, if we can, up to March next year. That's our effort. So in that case, what I thought is very unfortunate. Every time when I see what has happened in this country, that this discovery program comes into my mind. Destroyed in seconds. That's what has happened. Something that has been developed over 7 decades have been destroyed in seconds. And reviving it is an Herculean task. Please keep that in mind. You can destroy it, but you cannot go back quickly. It requires planning, meticulous planning, and the execution with effective coordination. It's a time consuming process and going to come up with a massive cost, I must tell you. So we have to prepare for that. And we have already started seeing there's assistance coming from the development partners. Now, this assistance is welcome. Mind you, this assistance is coming either by repurposing the existing loans or new loans. So there are still loans at the end. Repurposing the loans means we lose some of the outcomes of the existing projects. New loans, of course, still we have to pay new, naturally. But only thing is, rather than bilateral, as you know, when you go for multilateral bank loans, their interest rates are very, very low. Bilateral loans are very high interest rates. Multilateral, very, very low. So this is what the developed distance that has come. The Indian credit line, I'm sure you have seen in newspapers, very recently signed with the government through the Exim Bank of India to give to allow $55 million out of the Indian credit line to import 65,000 metric tons of urea from Oman. It's an interesting thing. India is the second largest producer of urea. First China, second India, third Russia. But India has a policy. Being the second largest producer of urea, they have banned export of urea. That policy could not be changed. No matter what happened, India could not change that policy. So only way they could assist Sri Lanka was because they are a net importer of urea, being the second largest producer, net importer, and they import mainly from Oman. So they gave the tender to Oman to provide fertilizers, 65,000 metric tons to Sri Lanka, which is, to the best possible knowledge of mine, will be loaded on 30th June and will be landing in Sri Lanka in on 6th or 8th between period at that time. But it's too late, but still it's too late because, but remember what I told you, in some cases paddy is harvesting right now. Okay, so with whatever the material available, they have done that, and even if majority of the time the urea fertilizer lands, our paddy will be towards the latter part of the growth, like giving saline to a patient. There may be a kickstart or look like patient is recovering for some time, but you all know we cannot live on saline. That exactly what's going to happen with paddy as well. Paddy is a plant. It has a nutrient requirement. It needs food to produce food for us. Like our parents did, they have given us nutritious food at the correct quantity at the correct growth stage so that I can come and present today and you are here to listen. Paddy plant is the same. It's a living thing. In addition to respiring, they produce even for us. So that's something that we have to look after always. And FAO Food and Agriculture Organization is also bringing in 18,000 metric tons, and that will be given to people who are cultivating less than 1 acre of land at a rate of 50 kilogram bag per person. Usually 1 acre of paddy requires 100 kilograms of urea. So if you cultivate 1 acre, you will get half of the requirement. If you cultivate half an acre, you get 100% of the requirement. So that's how it goes. That's what FAO is trying to do. Moving further for next season, we are struggling, I must tell you, until March. We are struggling to see how can we find money to bring in fertilizer. And then the repurposing of loans by World Bank pledged 110 million US dollars and Asian Development Bank pledged 40 million US dollars. This is for Maha season only. Remember, next Maha season is not the end of our agriculture. Agriculture continues. That planning is now taking place, how to look at the future needs. I cannot give a real answer right now, but this is what's going to happen for next Maha season. If the next Maha season fails, remember, we are done for. If next Maha season fails. So all efforts being made with every cost, whatever the possible, to have a good Maha season, especially in terms of food production. And that's the effort that everybody is doing that. We had a problem of seed paddy. Remember what I told you earlier? Next season seed paddy has to be produced from this season harvest. We cultivate about 800,000 hectares next season, which is our main season. We need about 80,000 tons of seed paddy. We cannot import seed paddy. It has to come up from Yala in order to feed into Maha. And we were advising the government, going and telling them, do this. If you don't give priority for seed paddy production, even if the inputs are available, we are not going to have a Maha season. I'm happy to say that a lot of effort being done by the government of Sri Lanka, the Department of Agriculture, to identify farmers, and government even have purchased fertilizer at higher prices and giving it to government farms to make sure seed paddy is produced. There are farmers who are producing only seed paddy. That's their market, that's their commercial activity, and they are being supported right now to make sure this 80,000 tons of seed paddy requirement will be there. And all departments, like what I mentioned here, are into the game right now, including universities. Our farm at Mahayuk Parliament, we have only about 6 acres. Every year we have been producing about 15 tons of seed paddy. We have been giving it to the Department of Agriculture. And we continue that even at a limited small scale. That's what we have to do. Fertilizer is going to come up, as I told you, very quickly. There's a crisis management right now. If the fertilizer is low, but our advice always be to the government, make sure there is prioritization. You can at least go with 50% of the fertilizer requirement and ask the farmers to make use of organic matter fertilizer, whatever available in the close proximity to support the crop with whatever the nutrients that they can supply. But even the government should take this decision very clearly. Should treat paddy, our main food crop, maize, main feed crop, and tea, main export crop, of our priority, as our priority in order to distribute fertilizers and pesticides as well. Not to leave out other things. No, there are other crops. Take rubber, coconut, cinnamon, black pepper. There are many things that brings us foreign exchange as well. Those will have to be supported. True, but give the priorities if you have to move along in this whole thing. And if you want to plan for the next Maha season, start planning today. It's late. It should have been done yesterday or day before. But although I say this, government is doing planning as far as we see. The important point is how quickly, how effectively those will be implemented. That's a $1 million question always. We have 101 policies in this country. You name it, we have. But then we are very good at policy planning, but we have failed miserably in policy implementation. Very unfortunate. That's where the problem is, and agriculture is not an exception. Pesticides is the same. In all these cases, I'm sure you see, I've been telling follow only recommendation. If you use something which has not been recommended by the Department of Agriculture or the Commodity Research Institutes, you will be in trouble. Don't do that, please. It's better to have a crop failure rather than try to use something that is not recommended. because that may create huge problems to human health and the environment, going beyond of what we know as human health and environmental problems of fertilizer and pesticides that we use. So that's something that we have to be very careful. Now what we have opened up with this ban is to allow these pesticides that we have banned 20 years ago in this country. 20 years ago, we are not even allowing these to be imported. But now we find everything in the market. You go and tell the farmers, අපේ කලින් නගින්න බයිනත් එක ඇත්ත. මාත්‍යෝ මේක විතරයි තියෙන්නේ මේකත් ගහන්න දෙන්නේ නැද්ද කියලා. Natural for them. They are the producers, not us. And that's their livelihood. That's where the issue is. You have to understand that. So what we are advising to the best possible extent, don't use any of these things. As I told you, the beginning, the front end of paddy cultivation is mechanized. As you see this type of pictures everywhere. The latter end of the paddy cultivation is also mechanized. Combined harvesters. Now both need fuel. That's where the problem right now. So on top of everything, there are certain, I know it's a difficult task. I see what's happening on the ground when you look at news from different channels, right? So same scenario will continue unless we are going to provide this facility to farming community as well. Now, you and me, what can we do? What are we to do now? Somebody else has taken a decision, somebody else has created a problem, but we have to provide solutions. Or we have to, no other way. We have to. My request, kind request is support the government's production drive in whatever the possible way that you can do. This is not to say go and clear natural forest to expand the land. No, full stop. Not to do that. But if there is land that should have been cultivated, but not cultivated up to now, at least try to cultivate using a short-term crop. May not be paddy at this stage, it's too late. But take a crop that can yield at a harvest at least within 2 months. Marambe, cowpea, if possible. I'm not asking everyone to do. If you go and tell this to a farmer, they will laugh at us and tell us, but people who are not into it, best way to go for it is use a crop that require very, very low external inputs. Growing Marambe and cowpea will not be a replacement for paddy. True, but at least your nutritional part will be taken care of because they are important pulses, low input pulses. So this is something that I'm requesting everyone. Now this home gardening. You do it a passion, you will do it. You are trying to do it for fashion, you will never succeed. So try to draw a line between this F and P. Then you make sure the home garden do. And don't try to go and do home gardening by waiting until the seeds and planting material distributed by the Department of Agriculture free of charge. No, that's not going to help. That's not going to help. Grow something that you would like to grow and like to eat. That's the important thing. Like to grow and like to eat. Try to reduce the pressure on your food plate and try to replace at least part of your food plate by the groans from your own home garden. And remember that is not going to get you to securing the whole food security part, as I showed you, but at least the nutritional component can be met. If you grow sweet potato, there are varieties that can be harvested in 3.5 to 4 months. You can grow it even in a poorer bag, even in a half bag, in any small space. You don't need it to creep around the ground. You have a support and allow to grow vertical, for example, and then come down through the gravitational movement, right? You can harvest it in 4 months. That means you're harvesting crop 3 times a year, isn't it? So try to move along that. It's not going to reduce or it's not going to overcome all our problems, that's for sure, but at least a small part of problem. And then the important part is help adopting community kitchens. You know, their community kitchens have been there. If you can do it, this is one of the immediate measures that we all can do where needed. Right? If everybody started doing community kitchens, that's not going to work. That's not going to work. Right? Target the community and start doing it. And try to reduce food waste. This is the key. If you try to reduce food waste from your plate, then if you try to do a back calculation, then you can see the pressure on the food availability is going to be low, and the pressure on the foreign exchange that we will require to import food will also be low. This is also not to be told to people who are poorest of the poor. People who do waste, do make sure you always contribute to waste, generating waste, try to reduce it, try to minimize it. That's something we all can do. You know, a recent study done by our faculty, Dr. Amrutha Konratha from Agriculture Engineering, it says from household food waste, we waste about 10% of our food that we cook and consume. From restaurants and hotels, we waste about 15 to 30%, 15 to 30%. And when there's a buffet, we waste about 50%. And you know, our piggery in Faculty of Agriculture is the most fortunate piggery on this planet Earth. All the waste from key hotels in this candy city are coming to feed our piggery, our pigs. But of course, that finally end up with our own stomach, isn't it? So that's a chain that we are looking at. But don't generate this waste. There's something that we can contribute at this particular time. The worst thing that people do is the last part, hoarding food. Hoarding food will definitely create a deficit as you see in diesel and petrol right now. So don't try to allow that to happen for food. That's a very kind request from everyone, not only from you, people who are listening to this through online or whatever the means, and for the whole society. Please don't do this. Doing it will create a problem, as I told you a little while ago. If you don't look after your food that is stored, whether it's paddy or rice, depending on that, the situation will be different. But try to help the society. On the other hand, right? You can store food for 1 week, naturally. You do marketing only 1 week sometimes. And when you just see the shelves are empty, naturally a fear starts. Uncertainty becomes the dominant factor, naturally for human beings. But try to help. It's something, a worthy cause that we can all do. So, ladies and gentlemen, my last slide. The scientists, academia, farmers went against the decision that was made. Not just because the decision was bad. There are a lot of truth in that decision. But people did not want to do it the way that it should have actually been planted on soil. Myths have started dominating science. Misconceptions, misinterpretations, misrepresentations, for example, had been the real contributors of this calamity that we all face. We are paying the price together. Please do not allow that to happen in the future. We will never allow that to happen. We have been keeping quiet. We have been laughing at people when they come and tell about misinterpret the scientific principles in agriculture. We're just laughing at them. We didn't go against people. But that's not going to be anymore. That's not going to be anymore. Myth will never be allowed to prevail. Scientific truth will always be told to the general public. And irrational, non-scientific decision making should never take place in this country in the future. Only professionals like you, professionals like farming community, and other agencies who are responsible to develop agriculture, and they are the only one can do that. So try to help everyone. Remember, අපි අදාන හැම ආගම්වලම කියලා තියෙනවා මම බුද්ධ ආගම අදහනින්ද උපත් පමින් කියලා තියෙන්නේ බඩ පුරවගෙන ඉන්න කියලා බණ අහන. බුදුහාමුදුරුවෝ එහෙම කිව්වා කියලා නිකන් කියලා තියෙන්නේ නේද? ඒ කුස පුරවන්න උදව් කරමු මේ හැම දිනකට. ඒකට තමයි මේ අද මේ ඉදිරිපත් කිරීම කරේ. ඒක තමයි ඔබතුමාලා හැම දිනකටම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ. බොහොම ස්තුතියි සමන්තුනා. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Professor Marambe, and it's a wonderful lecture. If you have any questions, please, it's the time to ask questions from Professor Marambe.
I thank Professor Marambe for this wonderful lecture. I just came to see what we can do, especially like the last thing. How can we help the feed the community others? I thought I can gather something. Now, yeah, I see one problem. Is urea issue. This last thing. Now, we are going to the agriculture for years and years and years. Why don't we make urea in this country? But if you ask the question, say, for example, why don't you make saline in this country? But saline is made in Palestine. But I'm asking, this simple urea, why is it not made in this country?
I will respond to that question. Urea was produced in this country in late 1970s and until early 1980s. Urea was produced. But then finally, to produce urea, you need certain byproducts of petroleum byproducts, like naphtha. And those things started going up in price during that time. And the government, due to other various reasons also, started from 1978, worked towards closing down at that urea factory that was available in Sabgaskand area. And before this decision was taken, there was a decision to look at a feasibility study to establish a urea producing plant in Sri Lanka with the government owned sponsorship, combining Paranthan Chemicals and Sri Lanka Institute of Nanotechnology. Feasibility study started, but this decision that was taken, that feasibility study also went for a 6. But still it's on the cards. There are people working towards it, as you quite correctly said. If urea is a product that we require essentially to go ahead with our agriculture, if there's no alternative for the time being to provide the effectiveness of urea, at least halfway, then of course we have to find a way to make sure we produce it on our own. So the efforts are there. Urea have been produced in Sri Lanka, as I told you, but there are discussions going on, activities going on, not only to produce urea, even to convert the powder of phosphate, not to triple superphosphate that we import, but to convert it to a single superphosphate, still provide the phosphorus requirements for annual crops. A powder of phosphate is a pretty good fertilizer for perennials, long-term crops, where they require phosphorus little by little. But for annual crops, it's entirely different ballgame. So there are efforts going on even now. This discussion took place about 10 years ago. I think it's about 20 years ago to convert this powder of phosphate into a single superphosphate. But every time when a foreign collaboration comes in, there's always antagonism from the society, isn't it? So because of that only, even for urea, without a foreign collaboration, the government had a look at, ask the people to go and do a feasibility study whether the Paranthan Chemicals and Slintech can embark on this activity.
Professor Marambe, another question. So, is the government planning to change the staple, like rice from this thing? I mean, when the our requirement goes up, is there any alternative? Are they planning to like? So because if the wheat floods, the other alternative, like in case if this goes significantly down.
Wheat flour is also in trouble nowadays. Russia and Ukraine together have been producing 33% of the global wheat flour production. And India recently imposed a ban in exporting wheat grains, not flour, wheat grain. So they gave an indication that in the foreseeable future they may also think of it. So for the time being, there's no indication or no line of thinking, even to ask people to change their staple. No. But it's very, very clear. See, when you look at, remember what I told you, present consumption pattern. Rather than looking at present consumption pattern of consuming about 6,000 to 6,500 kilogram metric tons of rice per day, right? If we can at least try to substitute part of it with another starch contributing product, depending on the availability. Everybody cannot do that. Depending on the availability, that will contribute. So that's the kind of request that is coming up. But not to change the main staple. No. I don't think we can do that. I don't think we can push people towards that in this short period of time.
Thank you very much, Prof. And the question is, so we have been consuming paddy for last 2,000 years, and I'm just wondering actually how much it costs to develop a 1 kilo of paddy compared to other wheat and other things. So whether it is an expensive thing, and we have to consider the water because it's very fragile crop that need a lot of water supply. That's why we are cultivating land rainy season. I'm just wondering whether we have to think about some other alternative.
Good. The costing for each component of inputs that is required for paddy and other crops have been done clear. But tables have changed in the recent past because of these exorbitant prices that you find in the market. If you bring urea today, okay, in the time that urea subsidy was given in 2005 through Ketata Aruna subsidy program, the price of a 50 kilogram urea pack was 350 to the farmer. But the original price was about 3,500 rupees. So 90% subsidy. And then in 2020, government decided to give it free of charge. Not even 90%, so give it free of charge until 2021 yellow season. Last year towards the latter part, when the ban was lifted to bring in urea, the global market price had moved up from just $345 per ton that is usually occurred in May-June time to more than $1,000 a ton. If now in the CIF price, if you and me going to import urea, for example, The CI price, the landing price in Sri Lanka, will be, if you converted it to everything, is $1,000 a ton roughly right now. We know it's 360,000 rupees, right? If you look at the government rate. And the price of a 50 kilogram of urea bag will be 18,000 rupees, 1/8. 18,000 rupees if the government does it. So if you use government machinery, everything to distribute and reach it, make sure it reach the farmers, same 18,000 rupees will be there because other costs will be absorbed by the taxpayers' money, right? So the issue is like that. But the private sector sell the same urea at 35,000 to 46,000 rupees. It's because they were asked to import urea at 180-day credit. So when they ordered in December, dollar was 2003. When they start paying it after 180 days, the dollar was 360 to 65. So what they did was they added that to the price. And the second point, the government owes the private sector 23 billion rupees, for the subsidy of fertilizer that the private sector should have. And they are paying about millions, several millions per month as interest for their loans. So what they have done is they have added the interest also into this fertilizer price. So now it's there at 35,500 to 46,000 rupees. So that is where the unfortunate issue is right now. What you said is correct. We have started cultivating paddy and we have seen paddies being cultivated for a long period of time. But only issue is, please do understand, when you grow a crop, you are harvesting the crop and remove it from the paddy field to another place. You harvest and remove. In a forest like Singaraja, a lot of people ask, how does those trees grow such tall and strong with no additional input? It's a closed system. Singaraja is a closed system. You don't take anything out of that. It recycles completely. So you need not have any addition. Agriculture is different. When the tea leaf is harvested every 7 to 9 days, it goes out from the tea field. When paddy is harvested twice or thrice a year, it goes out of the paddy field. When 5 tons of paddy is removed from 1 hectare of land, that 5 tons remove 105 kilograms of nitrogen alone. We cultivate 2 seasons, that means from 1 hectare, we remove 210 kilograms of nitrogen alone. Now, where does this nitrogen come from? We have 78% of nitrogen in normal air, in the air that we breathe. But it's not easy for that nitrogen to enter the plant. There's no mechanism. Unless there's a microbial symbiosis where nitrogen can be fixed, and when the plant dies or decomposes, that nitrogen can be made available. That is where the issue right now is in this process. Plants, shorter the growth stage of the plant, if a longer growth stage, if we cultivated only 1 season per year, then the pressure on the inputs is much lower. We cultivated varieties earlier days. I'm sure you have heard a variety called Marambe. Takes about 6 to 8 months to mature. You plant it in August and you get the harvest in the next year. Only 1 season per year. But we have to change it to 2 seasons per year. And the effort that we made to get a higher yield and make the soil infertile is doubled, for example. That's where the fertilizers have come into effect. That's why we have to go ahead and provide the nutrients quickly, because the crop duration is shorter, the yield is higher. Australian, we brought in Frisian cows, but certain cows are diseased. That's a different problem. Leave that thing out. But the good cows that are being given to farmers did not yield the expected yield, milk yield. Why? They were not fed. They were not given water to the required quantity. Likewise, the plant will require these nutrients at different growth stages. That's how paddy plant fertilization has been recommended. We don't apply urea at the beginning. The first dose of urea comes when the plants is at 12 to 14 days, then in 28 days, then in another 2 weeks, and the last one is also after about 2 weeks' time. So this scattered and split application is being done to make sure there is limited loss in the environment and the plant gets the continuous supply of the required nutrient in order to provide the yield. That's where the scientists are working on even right now. Though it has continued from ages, we have been called granary of the East. We are proud of that, of course. But whether we can go for that concept now at this level is something that we have to consider. That's the answer that I can give you to the question.
Thank you.